At this moment, Xavier Girard is with me. This is a wonderful new opportunity for the House of Rosenthal. Xavier is a very talented vigneron who we encountered courtesy of our long relationship with the Levé family in Ampuis. Xavier's family domain is situated in the village of Cote-Rotie, famous for its brilliant white wines. And his domain is one of the most gloriously situated in the entire village. It sits high up on the slopes. What altitude is the house itself?
About meters, it should be like 260 meters.
260 meters up above it with a direct view over the Rhone River. It's really remarkably beautiful. And it means there's a lot of very hard work being done there because it's all very steep and very difficult to work the vineyards. Right? Yeah. So we met when Xavier was doing a little stage with Bernard and Nicole and Agnès Levé. We had met at a little lunch we had. How many years ago was that?
It was the winter 2009, I think.
Yeah, okay, so we're talking about almost 10 years ago.
Right.
And it was a snowy day. I had just arrived with the team in Geneva, and I, in my typical fashion, jammed lots and lots of things into our very first day of work, so we wouldn't even sense any jet lag because we get right to work. We flew into Geneva, and it was snowing. And by the time we arrived an hour and a half later, it was more than an hour and a half later. I projected an hour and a half because that's what it basically takes us to get down to Cote-Rotie and Ampuis. And the Tattersall took us about 2 hours to 2 hours and 15 minutes because the snow kept coming on. And this is the month of March, I think it was. Either February or March, I think, of 2009. And we had arranged a lunch. We were all gathered at lunch, and Xavier was going to be there with us. That was the first time, right? That was the first time we started this whole process of developing this relationship, which is now blossoming and coming to fruition, and the bloom is certainly now on the rose, because you have now transitioned to taking over your family's domain.
Right, since 2012.
2012. So your mother and father, who I've met, who are an absolutely precious couple and rather exceptional people, were they the first in the family to start the domain?
Well, my dad is actually from Givors, which is a little town between Cote-Rotie and Lyon. Right. And my granddad were farming, but in a way that the old French guys used to farm, like mostly polyculture, a bit of fruit, a bit of vineyards, a bit of animals, but he was also working for a glass factory. So that was like, we were running two jobs. My dad,
because you couldn't make enough money selling the agricultural products, was that it? Right. So you had to have another job.
Sure. Right. And then my dad started studying wine, and he definitely get the passion of wine from working with his dad. But then, the situation where they were living were not like potentially strong enough to develop a proper winery. So he moved to Cote-Rotie at the time that everybody were looking for Beaujolais, and even my dad think of it for a while, but Beaujolais were just untouchable because too expensive at this time.
Isn't that so? This is fascinating. This is fascinating, right? Beaujolais was more expensive than land in Cote-Rotie and Cote-Rotie.
It's like you see, out of 30 years, I was been changing. That
was when? That was
like early 70s.
Early 70s, right?
So he came to Cote-Rotie, started been working for some winemakers, and little by little built his own winery.
And started buying his own land.
Right.
To the point where he ended up purchasing how many hectares?
So at the end, he was farming a bit more than 4 hectares.
4 hectares, right.
But only Cote-Rotie and Cote-Rotie.
Right.
Right.
And so he was really the first in the family to become a vigneron.
Sure. Right. As a only winemaker, yes.
And when he was producing wine during that period, where was he selling it?
I would say 100% in France, and even 75%.
But did he bottle everything, or did he sell some of it in bulk?
Not all. Right. Yeah.
So he would sell to what, the negociants, or?
Yes, he was selling mostly some Cote-Rotie to the negociant, and bottling also, just to select the cuvée he liked.
And the Cote-Rotie at that time that he was making was a very different type of Cote-Rotie than you make today, isn't it?
Right, but it's also like a kind of move we had on the appellation. Like back in the 90s, people were focused on super ripe Cote-Rotie, very opulent, really rich, with a strong bouquet, super fat, but it was the kind of one that won medals, but that you don't enjoy to drown the bottle because you get saturated.
Because when I started, and I was buying Cote-Rotie, the very first Cote-Rotie I was buying, frequently the wines were 11.5% alcohol.
Right.
11.5% or 12%
That was back
alcohol.
In the 80s.
That was back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Climate's been changing a bit, and also the farmer get better. So, you know, we improve on our techniques and we better to farm.
And therefore the grapes are getting riper?
Sure.
So the combination of new techniques in the vineyard plus the changing of the climate is resulting in wines that are much more powerful.
Right, to better maturities for sure.
Right. Are you happy with that?
Well, it's a kind of tricky things on the Condrieu compared to Cote-Rotie. Like the great vintage of Condrieu are not always the good one of Cote-Rotie, because the limiting factors for the quality of our Condrieu, it's pretty much always the acidity, because the Viognier get low acidity naturally.
Right.
So the cold year are the good one for Condrieu, and basically the warm one are the good one for Cote-Rotie.
Right.
So, like, you know, when they ripe fast, you just pick earlier, but you don't have the same balance.
But it's not the same thing, because it is true, as I've learned over the years, being a city boy that I am, learning all about agriculture and how to make things grow, the cycle of the vine is pretty much 100 days. One calculates normally more or less 100 days for the entire cycle to happen. And if you're obligated to harvest earlier, that means you may have a proper degree of sugar, but the rest of the elements may not have come to full maturity. Right? So it's a delicate dance.
Right. And that's a smart point that you show right now, because there's like a snowball effect. If you pick earlier, the leaves keep working, making photosynthesis and giving like sugar to the roots, and the year after they restart earlier. So the earlier you pick, the earlier the vine going to start the year after.
And then the more dangerous it becomes, because you can have an early spring or late spring frost, and the flowering starts earlier, late spring frost, and voila, at the end there's no grapes.
We've been lucky on that recently. We haven't like really serious frost since 2003, I would say, but it's a risk for sure.
Yeah. So why did you decide to follow in your father's footsteps?
I can't even say it's why. You know, it's been something natural. I'm the first boys of the family that really born on a farm and grew up there. So, you know, it's been something natural. I never even think of doing something else.
But you weren't forced to do this. You did it by choice.
No, definitely yes. Even that was tough, you know, to make all the stories with the family, to make everybody happy. And even my dad built the winery and the estate, so that was like his own baby, and take it over from him. You know, for him that was like really hard to admit, to give up on that.
Because the dangers of succession are multiple. It's not just a question of paying taxes, it's not just a question of paying the impôt, but it's also conducting things so that you create your own identity in the domain.
Definitely, yes.
While respecting the traditions of the prior generation. Is that true?
No, it is, definitely yes. And it's also like for the guys that stopped, it's admit that you're going closer to the end than the beginning, you know?
Right, of course, So it's difficult psychologically, it's difficult at the same time.
Absolutely, yes.
Right. So is your father still active in a certain sense? I know he's officially retired, but does he help you in the vineyards, or does he
but you know, it's like, he's a smart guy, he's good technicians, and he's been incredibly hardworking for all his life. But you know, when we work together, it's like putting, you know, like
two difficult elements together, two chemical elements they won't work well
So
together.
He's still working, but on his side, you know, like he can take a secateur when he's get a good day, he take the dog and go easy and
prune the vines, right?
But like more really for fun. And in the winery, it's not possible. The winery is too small to get two of us together. When I was working for him, sometimes I've been so frustrated because I find some like good ideas and things that could be good to try and to change a little by little. And he always told me, no, that's my things. I make my choice. It's always better to have one bad.
So it is that difficult transition, father to son.
Definitely yes. But it's also depending on family. You know, some people sometimes you know, work naturally and they just go slowly. But for us, that was not possible to be together for so long. So it's been one and after the other.
And it's true that for me, certainly, when we have the occasion when you draw out an older wine that was made by your dad. Which are really great wines, wonderful, wonderful wines. So even though you are changing perhaps the way you approach the production of your wine, you still understand that he was making formidable.
Definitely yes. And I build any ideas from what he was doing. You know, I start on his base and just change little details because I think great wine, it's an addition of 1,000 little details. And my base was his process.
And you have, in fact, increase the size of the domain. You have purchased a few vineyards along the way. And it's still possible for you to do that, correct?
There is some vineyard that you can find, and even 10 years ago, it's just out of the time I worked, because I bought my first vineyard like 2 days before I turned 21, the day it's legal to start drinking in US. And at this time, I bought like parcels up the hills and start farming it. And after that, build some other small parcels of Cote-Rotie that I fixed the wall and planted again. And that's the things that first helped me to as we say in French, make my end, start practice and doing things on my own, making my own tries.
Right, because this was actually your proper vineyards, that had nothing to do with your dad's work, right?
It's also giving me a good credibility with the bank companies, because when you start something early and you pay them back, you come back 10 years later and say, I want to buy my father one, is it going? And then they follow you. So it was like a good, like the good things to try and start improving.
Yeah. No question that paying your bills on time makes a difference, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, which is great. So the future for Xavier Girard is actually fairly brilliant, you think?
Well, about the farm, now I think, yes, the wind is pushing my side, so it's doing well. We had some great vintages in a recent past. That's also really helpful. Right. So the next big step is my new winery, because I'm still renting my dad one that is all on the side and under his house.
Difficult, so very small and
absolutely, and not so functional. Like in the new winery, I'm gonna introduce more like a gravity system to work more functionally, and even for the expedition, having a place that I can drive. Because the place they are, it's a beautiful landscape, but it's not functional.
You can't get a truck in there.
We waste so much time from working there. Yes. Right. So that's the things, and for later.
So as we buy more wine, it's going to be more important.
No, but it's good to share wine to everybody, I'm so happy to be in the company, but I need to save wine for everybody.
Absolutely,
it's really good to be
well,
there.
it's great for us. We're thrilled to add the domain.
Sure.
We have a team of growers in the Northern Rhone, I think, that is unparalleled in the industry. So thanks to you and thanks to your mom and dad. Great.
I will, for sure. And about the future, for now, I'm single, I have no kids, so we'll see that.
Right, so we'll see how that.
But definitely, if ever one day I would have to sell the vineyard to someone else than my own family, it would be like an admission of failure, for sure.
Right, yeah. Well, we'll make sure that doesn't happen.
I hope so. Okay. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Xavier.
Sure.